starting the recording on the Public Safety Committee meeting. Thank you.
Better identify who's here, Eric.
Who's here? All right, Mr. Weddleton.
John Weddleton.
Dyson.
LaFrance.
Croft.
Constant.
Steele.
Training.
Here's Forrest Dunbar.
Gotta be consistent.
Sorry about that. No, appreciate it, Mr. Constant. So we're just reviewing some of the history, basically. We hadn't got into testimony, and it is that Anchorage has traditionally done misdemeanors. A first time or non-aggravated domestic violence is a misdemeanor. But if it is aggravated, strangulation or the severity of the assault, or it is a repeat offense, at the third, it's a felony, then it's a felony. When we have them come in as misdemeanors at the municipal prosecutor's office and we determine that it was properly or can be charged as a felony because of the severity or because of the repeat nature, we refer those up to the state. Because of budget cuts at the state, there's been a concern that those were either declined or, declined, and that's been an ongoing discussion between the two prosecutors' office. One way to solve it is the ordinance that we put forward, which was for Anchorage for the first time to start punishing felonies, to define an area of felonies. We've defined it only as this area of domestic violence, which we have a fair amount of experience in doing a lot of the misdemeanor level. Ms. Wynn-Pearson, any concerns about us going into felony land?
Yes, Mr. Croft, I think as you and I discussed, it was on resource-based concerns largely. First of all, I would defer to Ms. Eno for more specific on this, but I understand that if we open this door, it opens the door to a number of other issues, a number of other moving pieces. If we have a contract for indigent defense, we have a contract for use of jail, all those things will be implicated by expanding the scope of our prosecution. We also, in this particular proposed ordinance, adds the scope of responsibility of the prosecutorial team without additional resources. And so to the extent we don't have extra prosecutorial time sitting around at this point. So it isn't that this would be something you pick up without sacrificing something else. If we were to have prosecutors focus on prosecuting these felony offenses, they would do that at the expense of time that would potentially be spent on misdemeanor offenses. And I don't know if you want me at this time to speak to the other conversations we've been having with the state that might be another solution, that a cleaner solution to the same issue, or if you want to defer that and talk about this ordinance in greater depth.
I want to get to that quickly, but just sort of the pluses and minuses of this proposal, and then so we have in effect a public defender contract for our misdemeanors, and our agreement with them is that they'll be defending the people we charge with misdemeanor crimes. It is arguably or clearly outside the scope of that they would be defending felonies.
Clearly.
And so we'd have to renegotiate and have some other deal with them about, okay, now you're going to be defending, in addition, this class of people charged with felony DVs, and that'll cost more. And is it as clear on the jail, or that's a murkier situation?
I think that's a murkier situation.
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at the
But anyway, it implicates that. Now we're doing this new thing that we haven't done before. Does that mean that the existing financial relationship on how we're charged for housing people has changed? Mr. Allen, any concerns with us bravely going into felony land?
You know, I just think that there are a lot of practical issues that I'm not sure that you factored in. And I'm thinking of sort of nuts and bolts things like grand jury and that whole process. And it's a secret process that right now the law only allows that to go between the court and the Department of Law. The Department of Law as a service, we run the grand jury calendar for the court system. That entire system would have to change. There are some other just practical nuts and bolts differences between district court and superior court and how that works. So I do think that this could end up being a pretty expensive proposition to the municipality, and I think that this alternate proposal that we're going to talk to will probably get you where you want to go, cleaner and cheaper and easier.
Good.
That's my take.
Ms. Stino, anything you want to add, or can they talk about what the discussions they've been having?
Yeah, they can do
So that'd be great. You've got a possible better alternative than this. Either Ms. Wynn Pearson or Mr. Allen can describe it.
So I'm happy to start, and I can go to Mr. Allen for more thoughts as well from his perspective, and also to Messina for more thoughts. I think the long and short of it is this is certainly a problem, and we appreciate the proposed potential solution, and have been thinking about this other options in this area as well. At this point, the municipal department of law and the state are engaged in, I think, really productive discussions, and we're very close to reaching an agreement which would allow for the cross designation of two APD officers to the district attorney's office to serve in an investigatory capacity in that office, and in return to cross designate a municipal prosecutor to that office that would be financially supported by state dollars, who would, from that office, as a cross-designated prosecutor, be able to prosecute these specific felonies that we would refer to that individual, and then in return may be able to backfill this position within the prosecutor's office, so that we aren't losing the team that we have right now assembled to address misdemeanor convictions as a municipality. So again, we're still in the still working on the potential contours of this deal, but we are, I think, very close to reaching an agreement that really allows for both parties to put some skin in the game and create a solution that provides more resources for criminal prosecution in the municipality.
Okay, so piece by piece. So, and I know it's you're still finalizing it, but we're sort of maybe in the medium stage, not beginning but not end, with some contours that we can understand. So, a prosecutor that would be housed in the state with their resources, paid for by the state, but dedicated to getting this domestic violence, felony domestic violence overflow. That would be, Mr. Allen, their first priority?
Yes, sir. So that's exactly right. And you know, I should say that I agree with you that this is a problem. You know, my office is facing back-to-back years where we've broken the homicide record in this city, and we've got major problems with robbery, sex assault, all this sort of stuff. And it's true that these recidivist domestic violence assaults that would otherwise be misdemeanors but for their priors are not getting the attention that I would like to see them receive and that I think that they deserve. And so that would be the focus of this special assistant district attorney that we would be talking about. They would come over and really be able to focus on those cases and handle those cases. And then what Seneca and I have talked about is if we get into a place where, because I want all my lawyers, I want prosecutors to have, you know, a robust caseload. So, you know, they're between 40 and 50 active cases at any time. If there was a situation where this attorney had the extra bandwidth, then, you know, what Seneca and I were talking about was that that lawyer would then maybe take on some vehicle theft cases or some other C felonies that are a problem for us in this community. You know, at this stage, I think there's probably enough DV assaults to keep that person busy. So I'm not sure how much overflow work they would be doing, but at least we would set up the structure so that that was possible.
I appreciate that, and we're trying, and I think succeeding in, this is a cooperative relationship that you have with the municipality. We think identifying this problem without spending a lot of time allocating blame, just trying to solve it, you know, and so, and, you know, it is understandable. I acknowledge that it's understandable with the caseload you have, that this very important higher end of our range, and so we're frustrated when we see it not prosecuted at the level it should, but it's at the lower range of your thing. Still very serious, but I could see how the prioritization could be frustrating at our end and even understandable at yours. So we rather than spending a lot of time angry at each other, we can just maybe solve it. And then the officers that we would dedicate to investigations and other assistance for the state DAs, we do that already, right? Police officers cooperate with you all the time. So how's this any different?
But this is, so if you go to a DA's office in pretty much any big city in the United States, you're going to find investigators embedded in that office. that are there to do specific follow-up. And I have to tell you, this prospect is really, really exciting to us because this is something that we've hoped for a really long time. You know, this isn't really about detective cases. When APD detectives are on cases, they're able to really sink their teeth into those cases and do all the follow-up investigations.
Slow it up for people, or maybe everyone's with you, but just maybe for the public. So a detective on a homicide, so higher level ones,
Yeah.
you already have a police officer you're working
That's
with.
not a problem. Those folks are doing what needs to be done in terms of the follow-up. Where we see some issues are when patrol gets a case, you know, at night, they arrest the suspect, they write their report, and then they're on to the next thing. And we may get that case and say, oh, geez, we need this neighbor interviewed, we need to pull the video surveillance from the convenience store across the street, we need to go talk to this other person. And patrol is not always in a position to be able to do those things. They're so busy doing the day-to-day things, they're on to the next situation.
Why not
So-
send a lawyer down to do it?
Well, first of all, they're not properly trained to do that work. They're not as good as police officers at that kind of work. They are expensive, and that's an inefficient thing for us to do. And also, we don't want to have our lawyers be witnesses in cases, so there are practical concerns in the courtroom about how that works. So the idea of having professional law enforcement there to do this kind of follow-up, you know, is going to be better for case outcomes. It's going to be better for victims. That's a really excellent prospect that we're excited about.
Ms. Thino, anything you want to add, or you'll let us know when you do?
Well, no, I'd just like to say I think it's a really fantastic move to be able to get those officers in the DA's office. I'm jealous. I'd love to have some embedded in my office beyond the ones that we have.
You have DV related now, but not sort of general.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So I'm optimistic also that maybe those officers in the DA's office will be able to do compliance checks as well if their time and workload allows, like ours do. That will help make sure that felony conditions of release are being enforced. And I would just sort of second what's been said, that I think the two different proposals are both good in sort of their own respective ways. There are advantages to both, there are disadvantages to both. But I would agree that this one is probably, certainly, sort of faster, speedier, cheaper, more direct option to get us to an end result there. So I think it's a good move.
Mr. Trainee, do you find that sometimes a blunt bill can force people to do a more reasonable solution?
Absolutely, you know that. We can take both tracks, so quite frankly, I'd like to work on yours.
Oh, it was a yes or no answer.
I'd like to work on yours.
Moving
Now,
right
do
along.
we have police, do we have detectives embedded in all the state DA offices, or just, you said it was done outside, is it done here in Alaska? Are we so short-manned?
Yeah, there are no detectives embedded in any state DA's offices in Alaska.
Okay.
This would be, and these would not be detectives, these would be investigators, would be my understanding, that would be embedded. But this would be, as far, at least in modern history, a new move, a new step.
You're making a distinction between detectives, detectives here or detectives everywhere, or the investigators? I was confused by
Well,
that.
he asked, are there detectives in other offices?
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you mean specifically that?
I meant
Law
investigators. I just want to know if they've
Yeah.
got an arm that can fight it. Because we have so many felony DV cases out there, and many of these things start with multiple felony attacks or attacks on people. And if it's not handled, it gets worse. And then we have murders going on. I'd rather deal with it at this level. I hate people being abused in a marriage.
The danger, again, Mr. Trainee, the floor, sometimes you don't get it back.
I remember that.
One more, yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, I had a question, but I lost it, so Mr. Constant.
Thanks. I had some concerns about this very intensive approach because what came to my mind was the fear of cutting more bus lines and cutting more library days to pay for this massive investment of, new prosecutorial staff, new corrections, all that. So I'm very, very supportive of taking and making an investment in our police and in our prosecutor's office to achieve this goal, because that's a measurable cost, something that doesn't break the bank and force the people who use the buses and libraries off onto the streets. So as I understand it, then you're saying that the prosecutor will be in the state office, won't be a DA though?
It'll be cost designated.
Okay.
It'll be simultaneously a municipal prosecutor and a prison
Right, what are we calling them? The
special assistant district attorney.
Okay, very good.
They will be a city employee.
You're right, and that's great. It really is, to my mind, a very rational and good solution. Efficient. 2 APD officers become investigators. Do they still, in that job, focus solely on the municipality, or would they be tasked in some way with dealing with other areas?
The current plan is for them to focus on the municipality.
Okay, thank you.
And do we have a similar, I have a couple of people in line, but we have a similar, or is it different with the feds? What,
We have, technically, to speak to the controversy, we have a cross-designated prosecutor who is at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so that's a municipal prosecutor who is embedded in the U.S. Attorney's Office, who focuses on Anchorage, typically drug and weapon crimes.
and in that one, we pay for that. It's housed over there, but we pay for it.
Correct.
This one,
We
the
didn't
state's,
start paying for it. It was originally a grant, but we've sort of absorbed it over the years.
in this one, the state pays for that, but gets this other benefit that they've talked about. All right, Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Croft. Part of my question's been answered, but concerning the cross designation, what kind of permanence? Is there any kind of agreement, or is it just dependent and contingent on funding? Whether it's the muni or the state funding those positions?
Well, if the current proposal is structured to somewhat like our relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, where it's set for a period, I think we have it at a period of each year, the agreement comes up. But the reality of these types of agreements is they're certainly contingent on funding, they're certainly contingent on the support being available. So generally, this MOU, I believe, has the same term that is present in our U.S. Attorney's Office MOU, which says that either party can terminate if they need to. So it's by no means set in stone or carved in stone that we have to continue, but it is set out to be for a period of time. Parties can renew based on resource availability and other relationships working. Our hope is that it will continue.
And Ms. Thino, you mentioned that we do have for DV only some officers that work closely with you or assigned to you. DV compliance, tell us what they do.
So those officers are part of a grant, partially grant-funded position, and they are responsible for doing compliance checks on domestic violence offenders who are out on bail to ensure that they're following their conditions of release. So they're checking to see if the offender has returned to the victim's residence or has had contact with the victim, or is engaging in other bail violations, and then they make those arrests as necessary.
Part of a theme that we've been coming back to in this committee, but is that for felony, there's a probation officer. For misdemeanor parole or probation, if you will, it's just go out and don't do it again. But you now have officers, at least in the DV context, to make spot checks to see if they're doing what they should.
This is pre-conviction.
Right.
So once they're released, once they're sentenced and released on probation, it's the same for all types of misdemeanors.
Okay. Pre-conviction while they're pending trial.
Yes.
Mr. Trainee and then Mr. Weddleton.
So we didn't give the prosecutor's office additional funding this year?
Yes, sir.
How much did we give you?
I believe it was 100,000.
Okay. How much more do you think we'll have to give you if you want to do this with the state? I mean, it's our choice. I heard Mr. Constance say we don't want to cut buses and libraries. Quite frankly, to me, persecuting domestic violence cases are more important than buses or libraries. If you're not talking about people's lives, they are with domestic violence. So Seneca, what would it cost?
He's
us?
got his checkbook out, Seneca. How much you want?
Have the city checkbook out.
To engage with the MOU with the state, there would be no additional cost to us beyond the AP officers.
Would you want additional APD officers or just take a couple that we have from APD? Because we've increased that by a lot.
Right, I believe Chief Dahl could probably speak to that better than I could.
I would like Chief Dahl to do that. Is he here?
Yeah, Chief Dahl, welcome.
Chief, so if we're talking about taking 2 officers, what's the impact of what you're trying to build on the police department by doing this?
Well,
Thank
I
you.
mean, anytime we, you take officers from one area and put them someplace else, right, we're redirecting our workflow. But I think that with this particular agreement, the good news is that we've been building the police department up over the last couple of years. And as we work our way through 2018, we're really, we still have about 50 people that are in training today, but they're going to be available for real work as we work our way through the year. So later in the year, I think that this will be something that APD could easily achieve with the existing workforce. And I've said many times in front of the body, I'm very sensitive to making sure we have an adequate sized patrol division to handle the calls for service, make sure residents aren't waiting for long periods of time. And we have that presence around town that everybody really wants. And I think we can achieve that with the, also being able to do this as well. So I think this is within our grasp at some point in 2018.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Weddleton?
That was my answer.
Then I have Mr. Constant, Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, just a brief, not to debate you, Mr. Train, but my point that
Go
I
ahead.
was
I'm usually
making
wrong. Go ahead.
was that we can, according to the testimony we've heard here, achieve effectively the same result, or at least a good measure of it, with now we know no net increase of cost or marginal because we have to come up with some new systems, versus creating a new system that we have to fund additional prosecutors, additional grand juries, additional prison beds maybe, additional probation officers, which could be millions and millions of dollars. And so for me, the consideration of that is, buses are important to people's lives, and we have to be careful of those things. And I also agree that DV is critical, that we deal with this issue. I wasn't minimizing that in any way. So,
Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, Mr. Trainee, I would offer up the $800,000 that I wanted to take out of the budget for this very sort of thing for downtown flowers, which are less important than
Yeah,
libraries.
Mr. Dyson, I agree with you.
Okay,
The
I have,
record
Let's put
reflect.
plastic downtown.
I have 20 minutes left, so let's move off flowers back to, I appreciate this. So when do you expect to finalize this? I think it's back in the state's court to make sure it fits all their
So,
criteria.
right, we're just confirming that we'll be able to obtain the resources to pay for the position. But I'm very optimistic about that. I think we're very, very close here.
Okay.
We've talked about the language. I think we're very close. One other thing I should add in terms of what the state, what our part is going to be. Not only are we going to reimburse the municipality for the salary, but we're also going to provide this attorney with computer and other technology that they need, support staff work, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, that's a valuable thing, and that will be our responsibility to provide those sort of resources. Also, training. Any sort of training that is going to be provided to any of my attorneys is going to be provided to this person as well, and we're going to pay for that. So, I wanted to throw that out there as well.
Good. We look forward to the, yes, Ms.
I would just second what Mr. Allen said. I do believe we're very close. And I think this is a real win-win for the municipality and for the state to each leverage resources we do have to make something happen here to solve this issue.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say briefly, in the 2 years or so I've been on this body, I think this is the first time we've had a state prosecutor here. And so I just wanted to thank Mr. Allen for being proactive and reaching out to us and working with us. And that's not to cast aspersion on prior DAs or prior prosecutors of the state, but I think we all recognize that we need to have a closer, more collaborative relationship in a time of real fiscal challenges. So I just again want to thank him and hope that we can continue with this process.
Excellent. Well, we have you, Mr. Allen. Our next issue is is to talk about bail and the current restrictions on considering out-of-state convictions. That is, one of the consequences of SB 91 was the bail decision has to be blind to, it only considers in-state convictions. So I wanted your comment on whether that's been a difficulty for you at the DA's office.
It certainly has been. That's an obvious hole that I think everybody recognizes in the current bail statute. And the governor has a bill right now in the legislature that would solve this problem from our perspective. And so we're just hoping it'll get traction.
You guys are all out of order. I just don't know why yet. Ms. Thino, have you guys run into that problem?
Yes, any time that you have somebody with out-of-state criminal history, as a prosecutor, you consider that when you're evaluating what bail proposal you're going to make. And especially for us, for certain types of offenses, if the offender is determined to be low or moderate risk, the court has to release them and cannot take into consideration this out-of-state criminal history. And so it doesn't really matter whether it's minor or major, it's just not a factor. And so the bill would fix that, and I think that would be very valuable at all levels of prosecution.
Can I fix it by ordinance?
No.
So I moved on, but people can have questions on either topic, the one we started with or this one that I'm trying to move to. So Mr. Constant? I
Yeah,
got you, Jim.
on this new one, I suggest you all contact the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House to tell him to get on the job. But I have two quick questions on the previous matter. Is there anything you guys need from us at this time that we can do to help make that, or do we just wait for a proposal and then act? And the second question is, and this is really to you, sir, if we have an an attorney in the office, will we be able to help prioritize cases through your office with our resources and kind of have a soft negotiation? I don't know how your office decides which cases to take, but it seems to me that that might be also a very high value for us.
Certainly, I mean, yeah, I think just the fact that you would have a representative at the table in our office, because we do operate in a collaborative way in our office. Lawyers, we all talk to each other a lot, and we meet about cases, about subject matters, all of that. So from that perspective, I think that would be helpful to you. But I will say, again, that this particular person has a very targeted mission, right? And their mission is going to be these recidivist domestic violence cases. I guess something else that I'll add that might be of interest to you folks is that the way we're structured at the Anchorage DA's office is we have trial teams. So the lawyers are in groups of 5 and they're assigned to a judge. And so they try all the cases that are assigned to that particular judge. I'm modifying that system a little bit this summer, and I'm going to have a specialized sex assault unit that's going to handle sex assaults against adults and children, basically all sex cases. And the reason for that is because you need really specialized training to be able to do those cases properly. And there's a number of reasons why it's a good idea to have experts doing those cases. And those folks will be handling cases from all the different judges. So they won't be assigned to a particular judge, they'll be bouncing around handling cases. So this was actually Seneca's idea, and I think it's a fabulous one. I'm going to place the special assistant in that unit. Also, DV and sex assault stuff often goes hand in hand. It just makes sense that the special assistant would get the benefit of that added training and all of that would come with it. So I think that's another thing that would be pretty effective to help out here.
Do you do solely management, or you get in trial too?
Oh, I do trial cases too. Yeah.
And Seneca, you were in trial the other day. Are you guys 50-50, or is it not really that clear?
No, they don't want me to. They made it clear to me when I was hired that the office is big enough that they want me to focus on administration. But I run the Veterans Court, and then I kind of assign myself. So I assigned myself a cold case homicide, for example, and I indicted that case, and I'll take that all the way to trial. I've got a number of other cases that I'll just kind of take. Cherry pick, I guess. That's what you get to do when you're the DA.
And then Seneca, you take a lighter caseload or a half?
I take some special high priority cases that come to me, and then when we are down attorneys, I cover as much of that caseload as I can cover.
Good. I have 4 people in line. Mr. Trainee.
Getting back to out-of-state convictions, it's ridiculous that you would not check to
Don't
see
look at
what
me.
happened. I know, but you're an attorney.
Yeah.
Of course, I got Neil down here, but they would not check out-of-state convictions. I remember that one shooting that happened at North Bay Mall. The individual could not even have a gun, so they shoot the place up. They get released, and they took off where they left, and they never showed up for trial, surprisingly. So whatever we can do to convince the state and whoever is holding this thing, it's probably state judiciary, we need to get their attention and make sure they correct this problem of SB 91. It should have never gotten through the system.
Well, I heard here, I think I heard it from you, Rick, that, but then checked it, it turned out to be true. It was stuck in judiciary, both in the House and Senate side. We're coming up on the 60th day now. But I think Senator Coghill has had hearings coming up, so at least that is moving. I haven't heard whether that's happening on the House side either. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. So I intuitively agree with this proposal to ask the legislature to change the law to allow review of these out-of-state convictions. We have two prosecutors here. I would like to at least hear the other side. So why was this done? Is anyone arguing against this? Was it just sort of a quirk, like an accident in the law, or was it a specific policy that was decided? Is there anyone here? So I would like to hear perspective, but I'd also like to hear someone who, do we have anybody from the Public Defender's Office, from the Office of Public Advocacy, even from the ACLU, anyone that might actually support this, to at least just explain to us how it happened?
Partially. So no one testified. I reached out to the Public Defender, Quinn Steiner, because I know him. And the reaction was, it's appropriate that it should be considered. It wasn't because they didn't have the data on it. That is, they had good data on, or they had data that they were relying on in-state convictions. I think there'll be, on this issue of whether it should be considered, relative agreement that it should. How, that is, how it fits in the matrix, what weight it's given, whether it just goes back to the discretion of the judge or some other matrix, I think will be the rub. But that it should be considered, I haven't heard objection to.
If I may
Yeah.
offer a little bit of input on how we got here. When the group was creating this particular scale, they pulled data that they had access to and then analyzed that data to help develop the scale. Out-of-state criminal history was something they did not have reliable access to. They couldn't pull that data. So anything that they could not consistently get for every defendant was automatically excluded from consideration for the scale.
And that's been resolved now? They can't reliably get out-of-state data? So does that create sort of a protection issue then? Because for some of the out-of-state we can find and some we can't. Is that what their concern is? That people will have the same background out of state and commit the same crime, but one person will be treated differently because we can access that data?
We can pull it. Prosecuting agencies can pull it. We can pull NCIC and III data and get that criminal history. It just, for the data collection purposes, they weren't able to get it in a coded fashion that they could utilize for analysis. So we pull it for everybody across the board. If they don't have it, then great. And if they do have it, then we read through it and we analyze what's in it.
The feds weren't willing to give up the data when they were creating the tool. That's what happened.
Okay.
Seneca's shop and my shop have always had access to NCIC. We can always pull the out-of-state history. So it was just a quirk in, kind of jurisdictional quirk in when they created the tool. And so, the governor's bill aims to kind of plug that hole and allow us to at least, as prosecutors, say, yes, I know that we show no out-of-state history, and so this person gets a low-risk score, but you need to know that they have 9 felonies out of California, and they just got here 2 weeks ago. And Judge, you should keep that in mind when you evaluate what bail. It's a pretty common sense thing,
Thank you.
There was a heavy emphasis on, and I've been, reading a lot about 91 and through some of the data they went through, on having good data on it. I think that's an appropriate reliance, but when they said, well, we don't have this quality of data or a data we'd like on an out-of-state conviction, to just then not consider it at all seems a logical fallacy to me. Even having not as specific or voluminous or reliable even of data. And both Seneca and Rick have talked about how our data is very good and reliable, and the farther you get away, the less reliable it gets. It's sometimes either hard to interpret what this Texas conviction means and what happened there, or that it really happened. But our absent data is pretty good, yes?
I agree.
Mr. Peterson and Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why I absolutely think that we should be able to use prior convictions from other states in, setting a bail for a person who's recently committed a crime here in Alaska. And, being a state that's a little bit of a distance away from the lower 48, in the old days, Alaska was a place some criminals would come to because they thought they might be able to sort of blend in here and wouldn't get caught or wouldn't get found. And so I think it even makes more sense for the state of Alaska to look at prior convictions in other states and maybe some other states.
A relatively transient population too. Mr. Weddleton?
I just want to, if we have about 3 minutes at the end of the meeting, add something to the agenda.
I think we will. I think I was trying to get us out of here at 1:30 when we're scheduled till 2.
3.5 minutes.
Okay, good. Greedy. We will look forward to hopefully the conclusion of that agreement. It does sound like it adds sort of something high on your wish list, Mr. Allen, and something high on ours, on Ms. Spino's.
Could we get an update next month when the committee meets? I'd like to follow where this is going so we can make sure it's getting progress, or if it dies, then we can go take another track and do this. Which one?
You're specifically on the felony DV, or both?
On both of these.
May I guess both? I have a draft letter to send to the chairpersons of judiciary on this issue, so people can sign that after the meeting if they'd like. Any closing comments from our prosecutors and municipal attorney?
Thanks for the invitation, and like I said, I really hope this works out. I think it'd be a win-win for all of us.
And we'll have you back on other issues. We appreciate it, the way you've worked. Chief Dahl, normally it's your show, but this is more a prosecutorial show. Anything you want to tell us?
No, this is great.
Okay. Then I thought it was going to be more compressed, but got through it quicker. Any public comments? We keep you to 3 minutes, but if you wanted to tell us something, it'd be fine.
Mark Marion, Community Outreach.
Are you coordinated now, Mark?
Yes,
Yes,
I
you
am,
are,
because
okay.
it is a rule of your committee, and it's a rule of Eric Croft that you have to be coordinated or you're out of the room.
He sometimes wears stuff.
This morning he had a Patriots hat and a different jersey.
He doesn't have to be consistent from time to time, but he can't wear conflicting teams. So he's Bengals, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Now, just to let you know, this cooperative agreement is nothing new. It's been done in states. My home state has done it for years. King County, City of Seattle, other municipalities within the county, the state, depending on. Unfortunately, when they created the Alaska State Constitution, we created it in a way that you ended up with Alaska. Boroughs didn't get really created till 1964 through some sort of legislation. Anchorage municipality borough wasn't created until 1964. And then, of course, the city of Anchorage incorporated the borough in 1975 to create this wonderful thing called the municipality to be home rule. Now, according to my research back in the 90s, what I was trying to do is to defeat a home rule situation in Spokane, unless things have changed. Juneau, Sitka, and Anchorage are the only home rules in the state. And I can tell you this, having the cooperative agreement is not bad as long as we do the following. That, we start with like domestic violence, as we say. And then, let's also look at shoplifting as well. If you shoplift over $1,000, maybe we could start that way as well with some of the retailers. As somebody who works in a retailer, I won't tell you which one, but I will tell you it's a home improvement store. We have had increase, and I can tell you every single retailer has had this problem, where we've even had retailers who close locations due to this, like Sears, part of the Sears Mall, which may be coming in a comeback in a different location. But I could tell you this, some of it may have to do with the state recession, which has been not helped by our governor, who wants to continue to take our PFDs away for some stupid reason, but that's another story.
Yes,
Now,
it is.
As far as Senate Bill 91 was concerned, this was never talked to by.
30 seconds, Mark.
Okay. Well, I will wrap it up. Go to Switson, family member at blogspot.com to get more information on Senate Bill 91 and its impact, and what Laura Reinbold's doing about it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share anything with us? Mr. Weddleton, what did you have on your mind?
Okay, since we're gathered together in an announced meeting, I'd like to add in public safety, very brief discussion on public safety and the Alaska Railroad easement.
Okay.
Okay. So
Start the
having
timer.
added that, what we did last night, I think we have a resolution that was proper, but the way it was done feels heavy-handed. It probably is heavy-handed because of that. And what I'd like to do, maybe to walk it back a bit, is have a work session that would give the railroad and opponents of our resolution plenty of time to talk about it. If we could schedule that for next Friday or the Friday after.
Yeah, Mr. Trini?
Are you gonna move to reconsider this? Too late.
Well, we already did that.
No, you didn't. You have to reconsider it. You'd have to give notice to the clerk's office, have a second on it. Because right now, I don't think the
So
reconsideration.
we did last night, though, during the meeting, we had.
We voted it down, so I don't
it.
think you can
The
do
previous
it.
question was called, it's
I
over.
don't think you did. You might check with Lisa.
Did you, Mr. Dunbar, yeah?
I have something, this is a good idea because we're all here and have something that's on topic. Public safety related, I've been approached by some members of the community that want us to express support for a bill that is currently in Juneau to prohibit cell phone use in cars in school zones. So not just texting, but also.
Rick, you're welcome to go, and Chief Dahl. Seneca, you are too, but you might, and Becky stays because we might get in trouble without her. But,
So I have recommended to those community
Thank you, Rick.
members that because we have a sort of general policy against resolutions, political resolutions, although in some cases we've done it, I would rather they write a letter, and then if members would like to, we would sign it. So that's my intention, but I'm announcing it now here on the record, so there's no Open Meetings Act questions. But I should have that letter in the next few weeks if that community member continues with this process, and any of you who would like to express support for that bill are welcome to do so.
So I'm just looking for someone to schedule a work session on House Joint Resolution 38 and sometime in the next 2 weeks.
okay, so yeah, I thought you had something on this. Can we go back? I thought we had an opportunity to do reconsideration. We took a shot at it and didn't, and that reconsideration was no longer
We actually have to
available.
take a vote on the reconsideration.
We did.
It was the last item.
We did.
But,
No, we didn't.
Mr. Chair, I would offer that it doesn't matter, I think, that we can have a work session to discuss the issues of the right-of-way with the railroad and the community, separate from the resolution. And so the resolution passed, the reconsideration failed. And that item, the previous question was called, parliamentarily it's done. It was the last item last night. But functionally, I think we should have this conversation because it would be fair to have those folks.
So, Dick and Forrest, is it public safety, or is it you guys in a general work session?
I think it needs to be a general work session.
We can do it generally.
I'll do it, but it doesn't seem to fit cleanly. But
No, but we're all together in
I'll
a next
create,
meeting, and I
John,
know
if
it's
you
on
want to
our
have one,
mind,
I'll
so-
put it together.
Mr. Steele,
I'll set the workshop.
do you have anything relevant?
Lisa there.
No.
Of course not. Let's, if we're going to talk right away with the railroad, we ought to talk about the
Lisa, did we
Fish
vote on
Creek Trail
reconsideration?
right away issue.
That's right. Because that's a concrete example of the issue.
We did.
No, it's a number. I think it could be broad ranging, but we should have an open discussion.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
Got 3.5 minutes?
That was well done, yes. And you got everything you wanted to say on the meeting, yeah.
No problem.
Then I will adjourn the
By the
Public
way,
Safety
Senate
Committee
work
early.
session, I'll just make that.